At 2:14 a.m., 5 FP-1 long-range attack drones, Ukrainian-built fixed-wing strike weapons, crossed the Rostov steppe at 160 kilometers an hour, closing on Salsk station, the junction controlling military freight to Russia's southern front. Inside the station, a fuel train sat motionless. Military fuel the southern front had been waiting for, days from replacement. The overhead wires had been cut 85 seconds earlier by the defense's own intercept debris. Without power, the train could not move. The Pantsir crew did not know 5 more were behind them. 3 carried 60 kilograms of warhead each. Aimed at the fuel tanks, the wires could no longer pull clear. The fire that would shut down southern Russia's busiest rail corridor for 11 hours had not started yet. 430 kilometers to the west, 3 mobile launch cells had launched 9 FP-1 drones just before midnight. 3 meters of wingspan, a rear-mounted pusher engine, up to 2,600 kilometers of range on a pre-programmed inertial course, and 50,000 euros per airframe. An FP-1 flies on stored coordinates. It cannot chase a moving train, and it stops accepting commands the moment the booster fires. 2 spotters and a sniper had spent 3 nights in the tree line outside Salsk station, logging every freight train that passed through the junction. On the first night, they rejected a train that cleared the yard within the hour. On the second, nothing military entered the siding. On the third night, a fuel train pulled into a protected holding track and stopped. The locomotive powered down. The spotters estimated a dwell of 4 hours and 10 minutes and sent 1 signal. The launch command went out. At 160 kilometers an hour, 430 kilometers took 2 hours and 41 minutes. The train's forecasted dwell was 4 hours and 10 minutes, roughly 1 hour and 29 minutes of margin. If the train moved early, 9 drones would hit empty track. They flew in 2 groups, 4 in front, 5 behind, separated by 85 seconds and 3¾ kilometers. The first 4 came in on the clearest approach, a low northern corridor, unconcealed, 4 separate tracks spread across 400 to 700 meters of lateral spacing. Their job was to be seen. 30 kilometers out, at 2:02, the 39N6E Kasta 2E2, a Russian low-altitude surveillance radar scanning a full 360 every 10 seconds, picked up the formation and generated stable tracks. At 160 an hour, 30 kilometers was 11 minutes and 15 seconds of warning. The Kasta handed its tracks to the 1L122-1E Garmin, a portable anti-drone radar positioned closer to the junction. The Garmin refined 4 discrete contacts and pushed target data to the Pantsir and 2-cored 12.7mm heavy machine gun teams dug in on either side of the freight sector. The 4 FP-1s crossed inside 20 kilometers, the Pantsir's outer missile boundary. On paper, the Pantsir S-1, a mobile missile and gun point defense vehicle carrying 12 surface-to-air missiles and a twin 30mm autocannon, was built for exactly this. 4 simultaneous air targets was its rated capacity, and 4 were closing toward it. Every channel filled, every turret tracking. This should have been straightforward. At 14 kilometers, the Pantsir fired. The first missile left the rail, climbed, and ran the lead FP-1 down from behind. At 2:09, closing the last 3 kilometers in seconds before the warhead caught the fuselage. The drone fragmented in mid-air and tumbled into open steppe north of the junction. The second target took 2 rounds. The first missile lost lock in ground clutter and flew wide. The second corrected, tracked the drone through a shallow turn, and connected at 8 kilometers. The drone dropped into a plowed field. The third took 3 missiles before the last one closed from below and detonated at 6 kilometers, directly above the freight sector, close enough that fragments rained across the overhead wires. 6 missiles spent, 3 kills. The fourth had dropped below the missile envelope. It crossed 4 kilometers, the autocannon's outer boundary, and the twin 30mm barrels opened up. A 3-second burst, 600 rounds per minute per barrel, caught the FP-1 across the midsection. The fuselage came apart over the eastern service tracks. 4 launched, 4 killed. By 2:13, on every metric the crew had, this was a perfect sweep. But debris from that third kill, turbine fragments, warhead casing, shrapnel from the Pantsir's own missile, had struck the overhead contact wires across a 20-meter span. Copper snapped, dropped to the ballast, and arced once before it went dead. The railway's protective relay tripped within a second, and the power section went dark. The fuel train sat locked in the siding. No power, no way to route it clear. Russia's defense had destroyed every drone that came for the junction, and the debris from its own kill had stopped the train from leaving. The defense believed the attack was over. 3 3/4 kilometers to the northwest, 85 seconds of flight at 160 an hour, 5 more FP-1s had already crossed inside the Garmin's 18-kilometer acquisition range. They were not aimed at the service tracks. They were aimed at the locomotive and the 2 fuel tanks the defense had just locked in place. The Pantsir had spent 6 of its 12 missiles and 1 autocannon burst. It had 6 missiles left, 2 cord gun positions with clear sight lines, and the Salsk, a ground-based counter-drone jammer built to disrupt navigation signals, covering the terminal approach. Against 5 inbound drones, splitting into 2 cells on bearings the first wave had never used, every advantage the defense had earned in the last 90 seconds was about to work against it. The second wave had already crossed into the Garmin's range, and it was not aimed at the things the defense had prepared for. It was aimed at the gaps the defense had just created. 5 new contacts appeared on the Garmin at 2:14 from the northwest through a corridor lined with steel masts, parked wagons, and maintenance buildings. The radar that had tracked the first wave across open steppe could barely tell the drones apart from the metal around them. It managed 1 clean track. 2 contacts flickered in and out of the ground noise. 2 more disappeared entirely behind a line of parked freight wagons and reappeared a second later on a bearing the system had not predicted. The Pantsir crew fired at the 2 contacts they could hold. 2 missiles left the rail and climbed into the dark. The first locked a locomotive cell FP-1 and ran it down from behind. 4 kilometers of closing distance compressed into seconds before the warhead detonated. The drone fragmented, its debris raining into an access road beside the freight yard. The second missile chased a return that flickered, held for a moment, then vanished behind a line of parked rolling stock. The seeker found nothing. The missile overshot and self-destructed. 8 missiles fired across both waves, 4 missile kills. 4 rounds remained in the launcher. The surviving locomotive drone crossed inside 1.2 kilometers, the Pantsir's minimum missile arming distance. That was the line below which a missile could not complete its arming sequence before reaching the target. The launcher still carried 4 rounds. None could fire. At 160 an hour, 1.2 kilometers gave the drone 27 seconds of immunity, 27 seconds of loaded missiles that could not leave the rail. The Cord heavy machine gun team on the eastern berm, 12.7mm rounds, 600 rounds per minute, picked up the drone visually at roughly 1,500 meters. 34 seconds of engagement window. The gunner led the target by 3 body lengths and opened fire. Tracers crossed the drone's path. Rounds struck a control surface near the tail assembly. The FP-1 rolled hard to the left, dropped below the roofline of a maintenance shed, and for a full 2 seconds looked as if it would plow into the gravel short of the freight siding. The autopilot held the heading. Fixed coordinate guidance does not process battle damage. It processes distance to the aim point, and the aim point was 300 meters ahead. The drone leveled at a shallow angle, crossed the last 300 meters in under 7 seconds, and at 2:16 struck the locomotive off-center. Not a direct hit, but 60 kilograms of high explosive fragmentation tore through the engine compartment and gutted it. The locomotive was out. Even if a rescue engine could have reached the section, which it could not because the overhead power was dead and the access track ran through a yard with falling debris, The train had no head end to pull it. The fuel cars were next, and the defense had almost nothing left to stop them. 25 seconds behind the locomotive cell, 3 more FP-1s entered the terminal zone, aimed at 2 fuel tanks along the consist. The tanks were wide targets, stationary on a known siding, large enough to absorb whatever drift had built up across 430 kilometers of flight. At 1.8 kilometers, the RB-504PE Salsk, a Russian counter-drone electronic warfare system built to detect and disrupt navigation and control signals across a full 360-degree field, engaged the group. At 160 an hour, the 3 drones had 40.5 seconds of exposure before impact. The Salsk cut every satellite navigation update the FP-1s could receive. For 2 of them, it changed nothing. They flew on gyroscopes and stored coordinates, and neither listened to anything the Salsk could touch. The 3rd drone was the unlucky one. 430 kilometers of low-altitude flight through varying wind and temperature gradients had pushed its inertial solution far enough that the final satellite correction was the only thing holding the aim point on the freight track. When the Salsk stripped that correction away in the last 40 seconds, the position drifted 150 to 250 meters west of the siding. The drone struck an empty service area. A bright flash, a crater punched into gravel ballast, no fuel, no fire. 40 seconds of electronic warfare had cost the attackers 1/3 of their fuel car cell. 2 remained, still closing on the freight siding at 160 an hour. The Pantsir crew saw them at 1 1/3 kilometers, barely above the arming floor, and fired everything they had left. 2 missiles left the rail, then 2 more. But 1 second of hesitation had cost them the last window. The drones crossed below 1.2 kilometers before any of the 4 could reach them. The guidance lost lock. All 4 self-destructed over the access road. The launcher was empty. The guns could not fire toward the fuel siding without putting rounds into the tanks. The cord crews could see the drones, but the fuel tanks sat directly behind them. Every round that missed would punch into the siding. The gunners held, waiting for an angle that would not come. The first FP-1 crossed the last 300 meters low and steady, cleared the edge of the maintenance shed, and hit Tank Car 1 on the upper shell at 2:17. 60 kilograms of warhead punched through the steel and met the fuel inside. The detonation ruptured the tank along a longitudinal seam, and thousands of liters of fuel ignited in a sustained blaze that climbed 3 stories in the first second. A column of thick black smoke rose from the freight siding, fast, heavy, fed by a volume the car's pressure relief valves were never designed to vent. The last FP-1 flew on fixed coordinates, no satellite update, no camera feed, no operator. It crossed through the smoke from Tank Car 1 and emerged over the consist. Tank Car 2 sat 3 couplers down from the first fire. At 2:17:38, the drone struck the upper shell. A second rupture, a second ignition. The fire zone expanded along the consist, and the heat reached rolling stock on adjacent tracks. Yard crews could not safely approach to uncouple cars. The firefighting train dispatched by Russian railways faced a junction where the overhead power was dead, both access tracks ran through active fire, and the locomotive that once held the consist together was already destroyed.